Might of the ShadowGuard is the first wing in the Manaforge Omega raid. It is home to the Plexus Sentinel, Loomithar, and Soulbinder Naazindhri. Very quickly going to describe how this guide is set up. The video is split into chapters for each boss. You can find them down below. The first chapter will describe the boss fight mechanics and each of the important abilities, and the second chapter will be role-specific duties. LFR and normal are practically identical, but I will make a note on any differing areas. The Plexus Sentinel. This is a single-phase fight with a brief intermission when the boss reaches 100 energy. The main goal in Phase 1 is to manage a soak and drop a debuff to the edge of the room. The intermission requires the raid to chase after the boss while avoiding a bunch of traps and a wall of death. I'm really quickly going to cover the room layout here. The boss room is made up of chambers. The raid starts in Chamber 1, and if you look behind the boss, you'll see an electrified wall. When the boss reaches 100 energy, he teleports into the next chamber and activates this wall, causing it to move towards the entrance. You have to use your extra action button to phase through this wall, otherwise it kills you, but each activation unlocks the next chamber, giving the raid more room to work with. There are 6 total chambers, and if you reach the last chamber, the boss will enrage, basically wiping the group. Phase 1. The tanks want to position the boss near the center of the room, and the raid should stay loosely grouped up around him. Eradicating Salvo will mark a random raid member with a soak circle, so everyone else should be ready to jump inside to help split up the damage. Manifest Matrices will put a ring around a few players, and these players need to quickly run to the far left or far right side of the room. Once this expires, it drops a matrix on the ground, which will deal damage, stun, and teleport anybody that touches it. Even if you run through these do remain active until the intermission, so there's no way to clear them. The tank mechanic is called Obliteration Arcano Cannon. This is a 6-second cast ability, so once he targets you, you need to run to the entrance on the far left or far right side of the room. Once this goes off, it leaves a big puddle on the ground. This ability also does a burst of raid damage, but that damage decreases the further away the tank is from the boss. Tanks are going to want to swap after each use. Phase 1's abilities. Eradicating Salvo. A player is targeted with a large soak circle. Deals heavy damage, but it is split amongst those that help soak. Manifest Matrices targets random players with a 6-second debuff. When it expires, it drops a matrix on the ground that deals damage, stuns, and teleports players that hit it. Powered Automation. This randomly hits a player and then arcs up to the next 5 closest players. The Obliteration Arcano Cannon. This is the Tank Buster. It is a 6-second cast that once launched deals heavy arcane damage to the tank and leaves behind a large ground effect. This also deals a burst of raid damage, but the damage decreases the further away the tank is. Applies a 1000% damage increase for the next Arcano Cannon for 45 seconds. The intermission. Once the boss reaches 100 energy, he will begin to purge the chamber. He will push the raid backwards, so be aware of your positioning so that you're not getting knocked into any of the ground effects. The boss will then teleport to the next chamber and start channeling Purging Lightning. This will deal pulsing raid damage, and that damage increases the longer it's channeled. The raid will need to run to the next chamber to reach the boss and break his shield in order to stop this channel. While running, there will be multiple bubbles and rotating beams that you have to avoid. The beams hurt, and the bubbles will knock you backwards. Finally, the last thing to be aware of is a giant wall that is moving towards you. If you get hit by this, you are dead. So to survive this, you'll need to use your extra action button, and it allows you to phase through this wall. Press it once the wall is close. Reach the boss, break a shield, and Phase 1 will resume. The intermission's abilities. Protocol Purge. This is the transition into the intermission. The boss pushes the raid backwards, gets a shield, teleports to a new chamber, activates a bunch of traps, plus the giant wall of death, and channels increasing raid damage until he's stopped. The Atomizer is the moving wall of death that will one-shot you. Phase Blink is triggered with your special action button. This reduces damage from the Atomizer by 99%. Role-specific duties. Tanks, keep the boss centered in the chamber. Run to the far wall when you're targeted with the Obliteration Arcano Cannon and swap after each use. Healers, expect a big burst of damage on the Eradicating Salvo Soak group. Expect a big burst of raid damage when the Arcano Cannon goes off. And during the intermission, expect constantly pulsing raid damage that ramps the longer the phase lasts. DPS. If you have Manifest Matrices, move to the edge of the room to drop your matrix. Make sure you're helping to soak the Eradicating Salvo, and during the intermission, use any movement abilities to quickly reach the boss and break his shield. Loomithar. This is a 2-phase fight. During Phase 1, the boss remains stationary in the center of the room, and Phase 2 triggers at around 50% HP. Phase 2, the boss will break free from the center of the room and then can be freely moved around the arena. This becomes a DPS race as the center of the room is slowly consumed by a deadly pool. The boss also takes increased damage in Phase 2, so save your lust for this phase. Phase 1. Layer Weaving. A ring will appear around the outer circle and start shrinking inwards. Infused tangles are spaced throughout this ring, and the raid needs to mark one of these and quickly burn it down. Once it's defeated, the ring breaks in that area and the raid can safely move through the ring. If you get hit, it deals heavy damage and roots you in place for 8 seconds. Infusion Tether. This is going to mark several players and yank them into the boss. These players need to run away from the boss in order to stretch and break this tether. Basically, the tether is going to snap once you reach the outer ring of the boss's room. Once it breaks, it's going to leave a silk huddle on the ground that deals damage to anyone passing through it. So try to drop these close together, as you'll need space along that outer circle for the next ability. Over-Infusion Burst. This is a channeled ability that creates a large circle, consuming most of the floor. Everybody needs to run to the outer ring of the room in order to avoid this attack. Healers need to be ready because while this is being channeled, it deals raid damage every second. Piercing Strike is the tank mechanic. It's a line that tracks the tank and damages everyone inside. Tanks should keep the boss facing away from the raid and swap after each use. Stage 1's abilities. Flare Weaving. The boss creates a ring around the room that slowly starts to shrink. Players must break an infused tangle to escape the ring, as getting hit deals heavy damage and stuns you for 8 seconds. Infusion Tether. This pulls everyone in and tethers them to the boss. The tether deals damage every second and increases the longer that they're tethered. Running 40 yards away breaks the tether and drops a living silk pull, which slows and deals damage to players. Over-Infusion Burst deals heavy, pulsing raid damage followed by a massive explosion inside the circle. Piercing Strand. This is the tank buster. It's a line attack that cleaves everyone behind the tank. It applies a debuff that increases damage taken by the next piercing strand by 300% for 10 seconds. Primal Spellstorm. These are marked by a bunch of purple circles that are on the ground. It deals damage if you're hit. And Arcane Overflow is pulsing raid damage every second throughout this phase. Phase 2. At 50% HP, the boss falls to the floor, knocking the raid backwards. He can now be moved around the arena. The boss will also take 25% increased damage throughout this phase, so it's the perfect time to lust. A pool of ichor will start to expand from the center of the room, and the boss will also create more pools with his abilities. This turns this entire phase into a DPS race to the finish. The main mechanic here is the boss's Writhing Wave attack. This is a large frontal cone that tracks the current tank, and it must be soaked by the raid. The only other notable ability is Arcane Outrage, which will push the raid away from the boss over 3 seconds and create additional ichor pools. It's best for everyone to remain in front of the boss and rotate around the room. The intermission's abilities, Unbound Rage. This is the transition at 50% HP. The boss takes 25% more damage and knocks everyone backwards. Writhing Wave. This is a massive frontal cone that is aimed at the current tank. Damage is reduced depending on how many people soak this attack. Arcane Ichor. These are the puddles of the bad stuff, and they slowly expand over time. Arcane Outrage pulses raid damage and pushes all players away over 3 seconds. The Primal Spellstorm and the Arcane Overflow are still present here. Role-specific duties. Tanks. During Stage 1, face the boss away from the raid and taunt swap after each piercing strand. In Stage 2, rotate the boss around the room to stay away from the ichor pools. Keep the boss relatively still for the Writhing Wave soak. Healers. Expect pulsing raid damage the entire encounter. Expect heavy raid damage during the Over-Infusion Burst channel and with the final explosion. In Stage 2, expect a burst of damage on the entire raid during the Writhing Wave soak. DPS. In Stage 1, run to the far wall if you are tethered. Mark and focus down one of the infused tethers in order to escape the ring. In Stage 2, stack behind your tank for the entire phase and actively use your defenses for the soaks. Soulbinder Naazindhri. This is a single phase fight that's all about ad control. The boss's room has multiple circles on the ground, and these circles are where containers will spawn. The boss will summon sections of these containers at a time, and the raid will constantly be moving around. The raid has 2 minutes to destroy as many containers as possible before the ads inside fully form and are released by the boss. So the more chambers you destroy, the less ads you have to worry about when they are finally released. The boss will then summon more containers, and this process repeats until defeated. When the boss uses Soul Calling, this summons those containers. The containers are called Binding Chambers. The tank should position the boss close to these chambers, as the raid will use his other abilities in order to destroy them. Soul Fray Annihilation will target random players with the line. These targets need to position themselves so that the line is aimed at one of these binding chambers. Once cast, the boss releases an orb in that direction, so players need to quickly sidestep the orb and let it collide with the chamber. Once it hits the chamber is destroyed and the ad is set free. In its current state, the ad is still being formed, so you don't have to worry about anything special yet. Just move the boss near them so that they can be cleaved down. As another note for healers, when destroying these chambers, it will explode, dealing a burst of raid damage and applying a 15-second dot. Soulfire Convergence is going to mark random players with 4 arrows that extend from them. You want to run away from the raid with this, as once it expires, orbs will travel outwards in the direction of those arrows. Arcane Expulsion is a large knockback, so make sure that you aren't standing too close to the edge, otherwise you can get knocked off. This also applies a 12-second dot to the raid. Mystic Lash is the tank mechanic. This is a channeled ability that applies a stacking debuff and increases damage taken, so swap after each use. Now let's talk about the ads. Every 2 minutes, the boss will release all of the adds. Healers need to be aware of the large burst of raid damage here as the chambers exploding deal raid-wide damage. More chambers means more damage. Once released, the tanks need to quickly grab these adds and group them up so that they can be cleaved down. Phase Blades are the most dangerous mob here. They have a Phase Blade attack, and this jumps to a bunch of random targets. Mages cast an interruptible Void Burst ability, and this applies a 12-second dot. And Assassins will target a random player, teleport to them, and then deal a nasty hit. Soulbinder's abilities. Soul Calling. The boss activates chambers, which contain a dormant add. It takes 2 minutes for these adds to fully form. Soulfray Annihilation. The boss aims and fires a large orb at targeted players. This deals big damage to players, but if it hits a binding chamber, it destroys it and applies a 200% damage increase debuff to the add that was inside. Essence Implosion. When a chamber is destroyed, it deals a burst of raid damage and applies a 12-second dot. Soulfire Convergence. This targets random players with 4 arrows aiming outwards. After 5 seconds, it shoots orbs traveling out from those arrows. Mystic Lash. This is the Tank Buster. It's a channeled ability that deals damage and applies a stacking debuff. That debuff increases damage from Mystic Lash by 10% and physical damage by 7% for 45 seconds. Arcane Expulsion. This deals a burst of raid damage and knocks all players backwards. The ShadowGuard adds Phase Blades. They have a Phase Blade attack that hits their current target and then jumps to other players, dealing extra damage. Mages cast an interruptible Void Burst ability that hits random targets and applies a 10-second dot. Assassins use an ambush which teleports them to a random player, dealing a quick, large burst of damage. Role-specific duties. Tanks. Taunt swap after each Mystic Lash channel. Position the boss so that players can easily direct the orbs into the binding chambers. Position the boss close to the dormant adds once they are freed for easy cleave down. Quickly group up all the adds once they are finally set free. Healers. Expect bursts of raid damage as binding chambers are destroyed. Expect another burst of raid damage when the Arcane Expulsion is used. Expect a massive burst of raid damage every 2 minutes as all of the chambers are destroyed at the same time. DPS. Kill all adds as soon as they spawn. This is the #1 priority. If you are targeted by Soulframe Annihilation, position yourself to destroy a chamber. If you get Soulfire Convergence, get away from the other players immediately. Interrupt the mages as much as possible, and actively use a defensive before the chambers explode. Congratulations, you just cleared the first wing of the Manaforge Omega raid. Shout out to these channel members. If this video helped them, press the thumbs up. Subscribe if you enjoy WoW content. Become a channel member for 99 cents a month. It gives you early ad-free access to all my videos. Also check out my Prefessional merch. I'll see you in Wing 2.